Can you please tell me whether you can see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Professor Chakraborty, yes.
Okay.
Just start in the next 2 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Just checking
Anything else?
whether.
Yeah.
So I have logged in from two different devices
Yeah,
because
I
from
can.
one device
Yeah,
I can't
yeah.
see myself and I also can't see you guys. So
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
okay, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I have
Yeah, absolutely fine.
post in both the cases.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Procheta, I
Okay.
think I met you,
So
right?
we'll start
We met.
Tulika,
now.
I never met.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, please start.
Yes,
Yeah.
Matt. Sure. We'll just begin. Hello, everyone. Back to the second day of the third symposium on NLP for social good. Thank you all for being here. Our next keynote talk is by Professor Tanmoy Chakraborty, who's joining us remotely from Germany. Professor Chakraborty holds the Rajiv Khemani Young Faculty Chair in AI, Associate Professor in the Department of Electrical Engineering, and the Yadi School of Artificial Intelligence at the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, India. He has received numerous national and international fellowships, including the Ramanujan Fellowship, DAT Fellowship, PECFAR Fellowship, Visiting Professor, World Fellowship, and is Insight Associate for the year 2025. He currently leads the Laboratory for Computational Social Systems Research Group. He has books, namely Social Network Analysis and Large Language Models. He's also an ACM Distinguished Speaker and has secured over 150 million Indian rupees from both industry and government agencies, Facebook, Adobe, Microsoft, etc. His current research is economic, adoptable, and interpretable language model and applying them to two specific applications: mental health and cyber informatics. In today's talk, Professor Chakraborty is going to discuss his group's effort in developing enhanced conversation dynamics for effective virtual therapist-assistive counseling. Thank Professor Chakraborty for gracing this event, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tulika, for the generous introduction. I hope you can see my screen and I'm clear and loud.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So thanks to the organizer for inviting me. And so in today's talk, I'm kind of giving you a very high level overview of what we have been doing since last 4 or 5 years in the space of mental health. This is one of the applications that I'm very passionate about because I also suffered from mental health issues before COVID time. So I understand the repercussion of this kind of issues. I'll try to give you a series of tools that we designed as a part of our lab, and some of those tools have also been deployed. So I'll try to give you as much of the glimpse as possible. Okay. All right. So so let me start with a story of one of my friends, and this is a true story. I'm not making it anything. A story of my friend Dinesh. Okay. So Dinesh is a brilliant researcher. He has been a brilliant researcher since last 10 to 20 years. Very unfortunately, in June 2018, some of his close collaborators in India, so they accused him for some research misconduct. Okay, and uh, so and this was a false allegation in June 2018. In May 2019, he proved himself not guilty. Okay, but in between this 1 year, he attempted suicide 2 times. Okay, given the fact that he was very honest in his research, right, and it was sometimes very difficult to prove when people, a group of people attack some other people. It's very difficult at certain point to also prove yourself properly. But nevertheless, he was lucky, as well as he was able to prove that he was not guilty. But the fact that he attempted suicide 2 times was something, not that it's very, very horrible. So in August 2019, please note the timeline. Okay, in August 2019, he realized that he was suffering from depression and anxiety disorder. Okay, and because of this issue, so he joined different peer-to-peer online counseling online, right? There are discussions happening in Reddit, right? In other other discussion forums. I'll talk about those things later. He joined, and he also took one-to-one counseling, side by side. Gradually in 2020, he partly recovered from this issue. He survived because he knew about all these tech things. For example, peer-to-peer review, peer-to-peer counseling system, online peer-to-peer counseling system, one-to-one counseling system service, and so on. He knew English because most of the discussions which happen online are in English, right? He came from a very educated family, so he understood the value of health, right? Mental health specifically, right? He was economically stable because if you know that all this one-to-one counseling, if you go to a doctor, a private doctor specifically, it takes more than 5,000 to 6,000 Indian rupees per session, right? Which is significant. So he was economically stable. That's why he was able to afford to this counseling sessions for almost 1.5 years. And most importantly, he had a super supportive wife who helped him, overcome this problem, greatly. But what happened to, other people like Karthik, Iqbal, Pooja, and other common people in India? India is just an example, right? You can think of other countries which are economically not stable, right? Lower middle class families, right? Who don't understand technology, who don't know how to speak in English, right? Who don't have economically stable situation, right? For them, mental health is just a myth or a luxury. Okay, so Dinesh survived, but I don't know whether other people in India who have been suffering from same problem would eventually survive. Okay, because of many reasons. I'll give you more motivation why this is an important problem specifically in India. So let's look at the global statistics. More than 1 billion people are currently suffering. This is a little bit outdated statistics taken after COVID, I think 2021 statistics. More than 1 billion people globally are suffering from mental disorder. More than 20% of this, mental disorder, population, more than 20% are basically children and adolescents, right? This is more concerning. Most interestingly, it takes on an average 11 years before the actual disease starts and the symptom is detected, right? And 11 years is a long time, right? Anything can happen in during this time. Let's look at some of the stats in India. So every seventh person suffers from some sort of mental health disorder. 74% Indians suffer from stress. 88% suffer from anxiety disorder, and these are all latest statistics, by the way. And it is also considered that mental health issue is a leading cause behind morbidity. Okay, so if you want to know more about the statistics pre and post COVID, this is a paper that I would strongly recommend. It is not my paper, by the way. You can read this and you can get more ideas about what is happening in this space. On the other hand, so whatever I mentioned is mostly patient-centric. Now let's look at doctor-centric statistics. So out of 100,000 people, there is only 0.75 psychiatrists currently in India, right? So you see there's a major issue when it comes to therapist. Okay. So, and this statistics is not India-centric statistics, as I mentioned. This is the global statistics, and if you look at global statistics, India is, of course, I mean, far below in this specific setup. But if you look at global statistics, this is even more dangerous, right? So, in the West recently, people started exploring this idea called the avatar therapy. Okay, in avatar therapy, what they do is that they realized that that patients oftentimes are reluctant to even talk to the doctor. Okay, because some of the mental problems are so sensitive that they also feel that talking to a doctor may actually reveal the problem outside the world, outside the door. Okay, so it turned out that if a patient interacts with a robot, right, he or she will be able to express themselves properly compared to interacting with the patient, interacting with the therapist. Now, of course, the point that you mentioned, I mean, anyone can mention that, look, when you talk to a robot, right, the empathy that you get from a human therapist may not be obtained from a robot, right? Then why do you think that avatar therapy is a realistic therapy process? So there are papers which basically showed that if you build your avatar, avatar is basically a robot, right? If you build a robot which has inherent empathy, I mean, inherent notion of empathy, right? Patients are more comfortable discussing with robots than therapists. You can also, we also need to understand that therapists are also human beings, right? Sometimes they also, I mean, they may not have appropriate mood, appropriate time, right, to interact with the patient. Sometimes, if you go to, let's say, public hospitals in India, let's say AIMS and other big public hospitals, right, you see that, thousands of people are basically standing in front of doctor's chamber, and doctors hardly, every doctor, hardly has more than 5 to 10 minutes to talk to a patient. Even 5 to 10 minutes is also quite long. Oftentimes they don't have more than 2 to 3 minutes, right? So this is not a problem of a therapist, right? It's a problem in general, the problem of the entire situation in general, because the number of patients is so large compared to the number of therapists. So if you look at the existing solutions, there are apps like Visa, Weybot, right? Inner Hour, Your Dost. Now these are some of these apps are Indian apps. Some of them are international apps. So you can essentially go and talk to this app, right? They have some automated ways, some semi-automated ways. But most of the cases that the conversation that you do are very rule-based, right? Meaning that they have a predefined set of rules, right? And when a patient starts interacting with the robot will basically follow a set of. This is basically a rule-based system, expert system, not a AI system as such, right? So, of course, nowadays one can say that, why not ChatGPT? You go and you use ChatGPT as a therapist, right, and see what happens. And people tried out, and it turned out that there are some cases where ChatGPT even recommends you to join, some sort of smuggling cocaine gang, right? Now, when it comes to mental health specifically, right, there is absolute no tolerance of any bogus such bogus response from the app, right, or from the robot. So the point is, how can we build efficient, interactive environment, which would be, tolerant, which would be empathic, which would be sensitive to all this information, right? Which would not produce anything that would lead to, let's say, some, some inappropriate action, and so on and so forth. Okay. So So we do not need an all-in-one solution like ChatGPT. Maybe we need modular AI solution, right? And some of you, I know some of you have also been working in this space. They may agree with me that ChatGPT kind of model, the off-the-shelf model that is already available there, you cannot use this for this kind of sensitive application. Okay, so to address this, now we started this experiment before ChatGPT was launched, started in 2020. Uh, we have been designing an integrated tool, integrated environment, right? Which we call Manaswini. Uh, you know, uh, Manaswini is a typical Bengali or whatever Indian term, right? um, which the purpose of this tool is to basically provide affordable, handy, and language agnostic intelligent digital assistant for mental health. Right. Specifically, this tool is built for therapists. Right. It is, you can think of it as a therapist, as an assistive technology for counselors, for therapists, but there are different aspects of the tools that can be used by the patients, right? For example, this meditation lecture, live yoga recording, right? Live yoga session, some sort of emotional well-being, wellness session, diet plan, and so on. But this is primarily designed for counselors to essentially reduce the effective counseling session. Okay. So now there are multiple aspects, there are multiple characteristics of this tool. For example, the tool provides a chatbot, right? It supports a video, audio, and text interface. It also supports peer-to-peer counseling, right? And so on and so forth. But under all these aspects, one important module which is important is the dialogue system. Okay. And those who work in NLP know that dialogue system, this is one of the major aspects of NLP. And these days, you can think of all LLMs which are out there, right? ChatGPT, Llama, Gemini, all of them are essentially dialogue systems. So LLMs and dialogue systems are kind of used kind of synonymously these days, right? So let's only focus on a few module of Manaswini, right? I would like to give a very, very high level glimpse of some of the modules. So when it comes to dialogue system, the three major components include dialogue understanding, dialogue summarization, and dialogue generation. Okay. So dialogue understanding involves understanding different dialogue acts, right? Understanding emotion levels, understanding the trust, different dialogue topics, and so on and so forth. And based on the understanding, you can think of summarizing the entire dialogue, right, in extractive and abstractive format. You can also think of more layman kind of summarization, and so on. And once you understand the dialogue, right, you can then think of automated generation of dialogues, right? Dataset plays an important role here. If you look at existing datasets, right, most of these datasets are curated from social media, and we all know that social media datasets are not very realistic when it comes to counseling, right? So there is a need to develop proper data sets for training this kind of dialogue systems or dialogue agents for mental health counseling, right? So we started off with dialogue act classification, right? So we curated a data set called the HOPE data set. Some of you who are working on mental health may know this data. This has become quite popular these days. This data set was curated by us from different from YouTube, right, and different other publicly available conversational conversations available available online. So, and then we transcribed, we annotated the data sets with human annotators, experts annotators, and stuff like that. So approximately 12K utterances were annotated, right? And we then label every utterance with one of these 12 labels, right? So these labels are called dialogue acts, right? If you look at the labels carefully, they are divided into 3 buckets. The first set of labels are speaker initiative labels. The last set of labels are speaker responsive labels. For example, let's say you ask for some clarification, right? So this is, let's say, sorry, I did not get you. What did you mean by this and this, right? So this is clarification request, and then the corresponding clarification delivery. For example, I mean, when you consumed alcohol regularly during pregnancy, this is a clarification response, right? Similarly, opinion request, opinion delivery, information request, information delivery, right? So these are complementary labels. Whereas you see there are 3 other labels which are more of generic labels, right? For example, greeting, some sort of greetings, acknowledgement, right? So normal chit chat and stuff like that. So we came up with a model, right? A little bit outdated model. This was published in 2022. We use this model to essentially classify every utterance into 12 dialogue acts, right? So we tested our Sparta. So we call this model Sparta. So we tested our model across different data sets, including ours, and compared with existing baselines. And our method turned out to be really effective, beating other baselines. We also then tried to understand the embeddings obtained from our model, right? And you see that if you use our model, and if you look at the embedding space, the squeezed embedding space, you can easily classify utterances into therapist utterance and patient utterance. Whereas if you don't use our model, things are quite scattered. Okay, this this indirectly suggests that our embedding space is much more realistic. So dialogue acts are not enough, because dialogue acts can only give you ideas about different categories, right? What about counseling notes? So now during the conversations, during a patient and therapist conversation, you see that we all know that, therapist. So therapist is busy in taking notes, and these kind of notes are called counseling notes. So is it possible that we use some of our models to automate the entire the note taking session? Okay, so towards this goal, the first idea. So the first, the first problem statement was to summarize the discussion. Okay, because counseling note is a specific way of summarizing the counseling session. Okay, so then we talked to the doctor, and the doctor said that in general, in a conversation, there are mostly 4 types of utterances. One type of utterance is called the patient discovery, when you basically probe or ask questions to the patient to discover the patient, right? To understand the problem. So patient discovery, then the patient starts uttering the problem, the symptom and history, right? Then reflection, right? The patient starts saying that, okay, 10 years back, this thing happened with me, right? I've been thinking about this almost every day, and so on and so forth. This is reflecting. And then you have some discussion fillers. For example, let's say the patient says, okay, the therapist says, understand, please repeat it again, and so on and so forth. Okay, so mostly 4 types of utterances. Again, we came up with a model which would first first identify these types of utterances. These are not dialogue acts, by the way. Okay, and then we came up with a model which is a simple T5 based model, encoder decoder model, which looks at the types of utterances as well as different types of PHQ questions, right? And try to come up with some sort of summary, right? Counseling notes for different discussion sessions. Okay. So we call this model CONSUM, and it also turned out to be effective, beating existing baselines quite significantly. Okay, so now this was purely text-based summarization, but when it comes to counseling, right, we also see auxiliary signals like visual signals, hand movement, eyes movement, gesture, and many other signals, right? Audio signals, and so on and so forth. So we said that let's look at multimodal signals and let's try to come up with better summarization techniques for counseling. Now it turned out that the method, the method called Aviate, the method turned out to be really effective, and we applied our method to other domains also, not only counseling but other domains. For example, scientific research paper summarization and stuff like that. Okay. So and again, it turned out to be very effective against the existing baselines. So unimodal, then multimodal. Okay. But in most of the methods that I mentioned, right, they actually lack domain-specific knowledge. Okay, so we said that okay, let's inject more domain-specific knowledge. Okay, maybe we can use existing PHQs, or maybe we can use existing thesaurus or existing knowledge base and do some sort of fusion of those signals into the textual signals that are out there. Okay, so so here, what we do, this is an advanced version of text summarization, right? With more domain knowledge. So as I mentioned, the domain knowledge actually came from foundational models as well as from different mental health specific thesaurus, which are available, publicly. So, and this is the model. The model is a bit complicated model. So here we first classify the utterances into one of the classes that I mentioned earlier. Then it goes to this PHQ, similarity measurement module. Then we also have, some sort of planner engine, which would essentially try to understand whether a specific utterance has any correlation with the previous utterances and so on and so forth. And here the actual fusion happens. And then finally, we get the summary of the conversation, right? So if you look at the method, our method is called PEACE, right? It beats all the other methods, including our previous methods, right? Across different Roos score and BART score. And if you look at the paper, there also we showed the human evaluation, okay? So now, once we generate summaries or once we understand dialogues, right? By the way, I presented only a few of the modules in Manushree. There are other modules, for example, emotion detection, emotion shift detection, and so on and so forth. Those are, those are quite conventional modules. So therefore, I skipped those modules here. So once we understood the discussion, can we think of generating utterances? Now this is a generation problem. Okay, so the idea is that you have the conversation going on and you have some sort of bot. This bot can be a simple chat bot or maybe a robot, right? And the model should be able to produce the next utterance quite effectively, right? So in this model, in this specific model, we took all the lessons that we learned in last 2-3 years, including dialogue act, right, summary and stuff like that, right? And we integrated everything here. And here, so this is basically an RL method where the RL module. So this is the method basically. So this is the diagram. This is the high level diagram, and this is a low level diagram. So if you look at the high level diagram here, so let's say this is the conversation happening between a therapist and client. This is a real therapist and real client, right? And your task is to produce basically produce the next utterance for the therapist, right? So so the dialogue act, the discussion types that I mentioned earlier, those would act as a reward for the reward model, right? If you look at this architecture here, so those would basically act as a reward model, and you have a combined reward, and this reward would basically go through PPO, which would further update the dialogue system for better and better generation. Okay, so we call this model reader. So now if you look at the response, so of course the model beat the existing baselines, but if you look at one specific response, for example, here, let's say there's a conversation happening between therapist and client, okay? Now this is one conversation, and this is the gold conversation that the model should predict, okay? And the gold conversation says, the gold utterance says that, okay, so you are getting A's and B's in real good numbers. So what did you discover about this? So our models, so this is the gold utterance that the model should respond, okay? And this is our model's response. Okay, what classes are you not getting A's as B's in? Whereas GPT-2 says, anyways, I should mention I'm probably going to get through that anyways. That might not be fun. And also dialogue GPT. So you see that, GPT and dialogue GPT, they are not that great in terms of predicting the next utterance, whereas our model is quite effective in that sense. Okay, and this is a quantitative measure. This basically beats the existing baseline by 22% and stuff like that. Okay, now we integrated our model into the virtual mental health assistive technology here. Okay, into the actual chatbot, and we observed quite interesting things, right? For example, you see here, this is a response generated by the model. Okay, and you see the model is quite effective in generating in generating questions which may help the patient express themselves properly, right? For example, what makes you think that they want you out on the street, right? Any other explanation for that, and so on and so forth. Very interestingly, the model also knows when to summarize the entire discussion. Right now, if you have experience talking to a robot, right, you see that this kind of mental health chatbot, right, they often summarizes the discussion periodically, right? And we observe that our model also does the same thing, right? After a certain point, it summarizes, and then again it keeps on asking questions to the patient. Okay, so all right, so this was about one module of the Manuswini tool. We also looked at the discussions on the social media platform. Okay, for example, Reddit, right? So we know that there are platforms like Talk Live, Seven Cups, right, MindPeer and stuff like that. And Reddit, of course, right? Reddit is free, but it's not free from dangers, right? For example, let's say if you really want some solution, if you're suffering from problems and you really want some solution, if you join, sometimes you see that your peers, right, who are interacting with you, they are not real experts, right? So we basically tried to understand the Reddit discussion properly. And we are not the first, by the way. There have been plenty of such attempts in the past where people looked at the Reddit data specifically for mental health setup, right? We also did that. And some of the results are quite non-intuitive, right? For example, when we analyze the discussions on Reddit, we first divided it. We divided all the interactions into three categories. One is more of an interactive category, right? The interactive category means, let's say, a patient asks something, somebody responds. Patient again, the patient keeps on asking questions, right? Whereas the second category is non-interactive category, where the patient asks questions, people respond, but patient doesn't find the response appropriate, so the patient will stop interacting. It is a kind of a non-interactive because the patient is not very happy with the response. The third one is more of an isolated response, where patient interacts, patient posts their problems, and there is no interaction. Okay, so if you and then we also looked at different types of interactions, more of a criticism, self-criticism, right? So criticism with reasoning. For example, let's say you criticize someone's behavior with reasoning, whereas you criticize someone without any reasoning, whereas in some cases you criticize yourself, and so on and so forth. So it turned out that when you when there's a criticism with no reason, right? Criticism with no reason, that would draw very less response, right? Only 0.98% of responses come if the original post is criticism with no reason, which is quite intuitive, right? On the other hand, self-criticism, okay, and criticism with response, those kind of responses gain a lot of follow-ups, a lot of interaction. Okay, so we also studied the interaction pattern, right? And we observed that interactive posts are basically the interactive posts have 2 times more readable posts as compared to isolated posts, right? So it means that if a post is interactive, right, you expect that you will have a lot of readers, right? Whereas If the post is isolated post, you will not have that many readers, right? So we also we also analyzed different types of emotions. So emotion distribution of interactive and isolated post, right, in general. And we saw that the distribution of emotions over interactive and non-interactive post are quite different, right? For example, you see here, if it is isolated post, right, it has a lot of neutral emotion, whereas if it is interactive post, mostly the emotion is sadness. Okay. So more interactive posts, posts which are more interactive, those are more curious kind of posts, sad post, more of a feared kind of post, right, and so on and so forth. Okay, so these are some of the findings that we obtained from the social media data, right? How am I doing in terms of the time? Can I have 5-10 more minutes?
Yeah, you're
Rosita?
fine. You have
Yes, yes.
you have total 1 hour, so yeah, you are doing
Oh,
fine.
all right. Okay. Okay, so these are some of the interesting findings, and let me now quickly give you what else we are doing in this space. So the hope data that I mentioned, right? The major problem with the hope data was that the kind of counseling notes that the doctor expects from a dialogue agent, right? That was not there in the data set, because when we started curating the data 5 years back, right? Uh, we basically followed certain types of templates the doctor follows, but then we realized that that specific template is not something that specifically in Indian doctors follow, right? So then we thought that, okay, let us re-annotate the data again. Okay, now these times we invited doctors from AIIMS Delhi, and they annotated 191 counseling sessions with their templates, right? They followed their templates and they annotated. And then we benchmarked. We just benchmarked. We tried understanding whether existing LLMs, right, are at all able to follow these templates. So let's say if you give the template to the model, and if you ask the model to generate a summary based on the template, would they be able to do that? It turned out that all, uh, you know, all open source models. Remember, we can't use closed source models here because these are sensitive data, right? Specifically, when it comes to deployment, we can't use ChatGPT. So we tested open source models, and the results are not very impressive, right? We then came up with our own method, which is a modified version of Mental Llama. Some of you know that Mental Llama is a model which was proposed specifically for mental health, right? Mental Llama was also not very great. If you look at Rouge 1 or let's say Rouge L score, right? It's not very great. So the point is it possible to come up with better methods? Of course, there's a possibility. And recently we developed a new model for that, and this is currently under submission. So if you are interested in working in this data set, this is publicly available, so you can go and collect it from the paper. Okay. Okay, so the next, so a related work that we did recently last year is now mental health. As we understand, there are multiple reasons. Okay, now one reason that we realized, the doctor also mentioned, is problems related to menstrual health, sexual health in general. Okay, specifically in rural India. If you go to rural India, you see that people don't have much understanding about amount women problems, specifically when it comes to menstrual health, sexual health, and stuff like that. So we developed a tool or an app called Sukh Sandesh, right, in collaboration with Gram Bunny. Gram Bunny is basically a startup working with different hospitals in the rural sector. So this is a simple QA system, a question answering system, which is empowered by our own LLM, which was trained on mental health data, right? Specifically fine-tuned on sexual education in the Indian context, right? And we deployed this more than 1,000 users used this, and then it turned out to be really effective. We are currently in the stage of making a proper technology transfer for this specific model. This year we have started working with NIMHANS for another tool, and this tool is called Sahay. This is a multimodal privacy preserving AI model for suicide risk detection. Suicide risk detection, as we all know, in India, specifically in educational sectors, which is very sad. Educational sectors, IITs and other educational institutes, right? There are plenty of cases every month, every year, where students commit suicide. So is it possible to look at their app usage, their social media usage, their other activities, right, to detect this kind of to early predict this kind of suicide risk, right? And this we are currently working, in collaboration with NIMHANS in building this kind of tool. We wrote a paper, kind of a opinion paper in Nature Machine Intelligence recently, where we addressed the problems that specifically in Indian setting people are suffering from, and how generative AI can be used for suicide prevention in India. I talked about sexual health. We also designed a tool for menstrual health, right? And we call this tool ISA, okay? And similar to Sukh Sandesh, this was also deployed recently. So we came up with a new LLM which is fine-tuned, a llama which is fine-tuned on menstrual data, and we call this Menst Llama. This is available online publicly, so if you are interested in this kind of area, so you can just download it and use it. So the tool ISA is backed by Menst Llama, okay, and this is again a QA kind of model where you ask questions in Indian languages related to menstrual health, right? And you can basically get effective responses. We tested with patients, we tested with students in IIT. We also tested with people in the rural sector. It turned out to be effective. Of course, this is a POC. There are plenty of opportunities to improve these kind of tools. Yeah, so that's it. I would like to stop here by saying that Manaswini has been tested by clinicians, right? And hopefully by 2025, we'll be able to launch it properly, so that it would, again, one important point to note is that we are concerned that we may not be able to launch it for patients, because after all, the models that are used underlying the entire architecture are all LLM based models, right? So there are cases that models hallucinate, models may generate insensitive responses that may lead to some sort of catastrophic issues, right? So we will make sure that this will only go to doctors, and this would act as a kind of assistive technologies for clinicians in India. Okay, that's it. If you have any questions, I'm ready to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chakraborty, for such an insightful talk and for all the great work that you're doing. It's truly inspiring. Now we'll open the floors for questions, and we already have question. It's from Gauranga. He's from CMI. And he says, your project mirrors exactly the independent work that I'm doing, all out of curiosity, a standalone LLM powered web app for psychotherapy and counseling. My brain tries to close several gaps flagged in recent literature. I wanted to ask, how do you research address points 4 and 5 in which neglect of complex or less prevalent conditions?
Tulika, I'm not getting your voice is cutting down in
I
between.
think sometimes it is breaking out.
Yeah.
Would you mind if I
Please,
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
please, yeah.
Okay. So I think so yeah, he's a recent graduate from CMI. So he is saying that so he has done some standalone LLM powered web app for
Mm,
psychotherapy and counseling. So
mm,
his design tries to close several gaps flagged in
mm,
research literature. So he has mentioned all these things, that uneven attention to the different stages of psychotherapy, limited
mm,
use of multimodal, multi-level temporal data,
mm,
dependence on proprietary closed source models, neglect of complex or less prevalent conditions, for example, ADHD, and
mm.
then fragmented evaluation metrics and validation protocols. I wanted to ask, how do your research address points 4 and 5, which is, I think, about neglect of complex or less prevalent conditions like ADHD and fragmented evaluation metrics and validation protocols? And I would love to compare approaches and explore possible collaboration. Is there any possibility? I think that's what he has asked.
So we have been so far we have been only focusing on depression and anxiety. We have not been focusing on ADHD, right? There are many types of mental health issues. We need to understand this, but specifically we are focusing on anxiety and depression because these are two prevalent diseases in India at least, right? As number five is the fragmented evaluation metrics and validation protocols. What do you mean by fragmented evaluation metrics?
I was
So
waiting. Yeah.
so look, the way we evaluate these kind of models, okay, there are quantitative evaluation, there are qualitative evaluation. Quantitative evaluations, we mostly use NLP metrics like Rouge score, Blue score, all the scores that we generally use for dialogue systems. But we also understand that these metrics are not great, right? Specifically when it comes to mental health. So most of our qualitative evaluations, right? And these evaluations are systematic evaluation, by the way. I mean, this is not something that the AI community has come up with. These evaluations have been come up with by mental health community. Okay, so there are frameworks. If you look at our paper, there are frameworks through which these counselors evaluate the efficacy of these models, right? There are different metrics, different scales, and so on. So these are not fragmented metrics, by the way. So I don't know whether what do you mean by fragmented evaluation, but these are very standard evaluation protocol that the doctors follow. Okay.
Okay.
Is your view on using few shot learning techniques for mental? Okay, so no, so we did that, right? So when I said um, LLM evaluation, right? In one of the slides, I mentioned about LLM benchmarking, right? And I mentioned that we tested our method. We evaluated, we benchmark our data set with multiple LLMs, right? What I meant to say is that we used both few shot and zero shot and few shot evaluation. So I mean, these are not very effective. I mean, and the major reason is that mental health is a problem which our doctors say. This is not something I'm saying. My doctor collaborators always say that it's not like a problem in your chest or in your kidney or in your heart, right? For which appropriate medicines. Mental health is very, very personalized. Okay. And for every personalized mental health issue, there's a separate, a different key. Okay. So if you use few shot, right? If you use examples from, let's say, any other person's utterances and you use this for another person, that may not be useful. So, and it was quite evident in the qualitative and quantitative evaluation that we performed. Okay. So yeah, that's the response. And therefore I think that special models should be required, which is at least fine-tuned, not trained, if not trained, at least fine-tuned on mental health data, mental health text data, mental health, maybe multimodal data for specific reasoning.
Okay. Okay. Uh, uh,
There is
I
another question.
another questions. Can LLMs be trained to detect implicit suicidal ideation or self-harm tendencies?
Can LLM be trained to detect implicit? Yes. so the model that I mentioned, right? I mean, again, our model is not the first model. The Sahai model that I mentioned, right? There are many attempts in the past where people were uh, were successfully, I would say successfully, because again, this is very difficult to evaluate, right? In the real world, how do you evaluate whether your tool would lead to maybe stop somebody from attempting suicide, right? It's very difficult to evaluate, but it turned out that the kind of signals that the model use, right? um, for the patients who already committed suicide, right? If they had used these tools, that could have been prevented. I mean, this is kind of a post hoc analysis, right? But I still believe that there are plenty of signals which look, the suicide attempt is just a 1 second thought, right? If you can stop that person at that specific point, you'll be able to prevent suicide, right? Now, I mean, these kind of tools are effective in giving you more motivation, more support, right? But if it is a real desperation, right, then I think it's very difficult. But I still feel that today's AI models are quite efficient in terms of at least predicting self harms and suicide tendency. Now, now you may ask that what are the inputs that the model need? Now, the model needs plenty of inputs. For example, the kind of the work that we did, that specific model used signals from app usage, signals from social media platforms. So you need to surrender your social media platform. That's a problem. But sometimes, in the West, there are plenty of cases where plenty of places, educational places where when you admit, you have to surrender your social media. Surrender means your social media platform can also be inspected by the model. Okay, so if these kind of things are available in India, I think one can address this problem effectively.
Okay, I think that includes all the questions. I had one question, actually, a couple of questions. So, the first thing that I wanted to ask is that in your initial work in this dialogued work categorization,
Yeah,
and there also
yeah,
for
yeah.
counseling summarization, you mentioned those categories. So, I was just curious that these categories is like all the researchers, like these AI researchers came up with these categories, or
No, 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 no. All doctors, doctors. So both the dialogue acts and I mean the first slide that I mentioned about dialogue act, right? 12 different dialogue acts, and
yeah,
the
yeah.
second category that I mentioned, like reflection, symptoms and stuff like that. So all these categories were defined by them. I mean, we did not. So these are not these are not the dialogue acts that we generally use in NLP research.
Okay, okay, okay. And another thing is that in the last also you said that, like, for example, the conversation app that you have developed, you said that we cannot deploy it obviously because of the safety reasons. So doctors are going to probably
Yeah,
the
yeah,
doctors are going to use it. So
yeah.
I was just curious that how exactly do you think so? Like, so the doctors are going to interact with the model and then get the response, or like,
No, 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 no. So so the current setup of the model would basically follow something like this. So when you go to a doctor's chamber,
yeah,
right? There is a you see. I mean, if you go to AIMS Delhi, for example, you see that there is a robot, a tabletop small robot. Okay, you start interacting with the robot, and the robot would start asking questions, and these questions are very very predefined, very standard questions, right? There is no AI generated question as such. Okay, so now in a traditional therapy session, there are multiple stages. The first stage is called history taking session. Okay, when where a doctor start I mean a patient starts interacting with a doctor, and this doctor is basically a junior doctor, right?
mm,
um, so and this interaction takes place for more than an hour, right? And then after the 1 hour of interaction, the doctor starts summarizing the entire history. Now, what our model does is that we kind of try to automate the entire process, not automate, semi-automate the entire process. where you go and start talking to the robot. The robot will start asking the same questions that the doctor eventually would ask, right? And these are predefined questions, templated questions, and the entire conversation will be recorded. Okay, the recording will be given to the tool. The tool will summarize the entire conversation, right, in just one go, within following the template, and the templatic summary will be given to the doctor for assessment. This is one module that we deployed. The second module that we are going to deploy is that, uh, from the entire discussion, can the model understands the causes, right? So it is called causal traces. Okay, let's say if I say that, look, I'm having a depression, and maybe the reason is some family issue, right? And then the model starts asking your family issues, right? And from the discussion, the model will try to come up with a tree or kind of a graph, which we call a causal graph. Okay, and the causal graph will be given to the doctor again for assessment. So all these outputs will not be given to the patient.
Okay.
These
Got it.
outputs will be given to the doctor, and these outputs will basically act as a prior for the doctor.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. And another question that I had is like, since you have done this much extensive work on this field, and like all this work you have done on the real world data, social media data, and all, what do you think is the scope of simulated data in this domain?
Lot
Because
of scope.
very-
This is a very, very good question. And I strongly feel that this is one of the fields where I think synthetic data is very useful, because it's very difficult to curate real world data. Okay. So the data that we used, as I mentioned, this was curated from YouTube. And these are also synthetic data sets, because the conversation that was recorded on YouTube, these are synthetic conversations. Conversation between a staged, in a stage, you see a counselor acting as a person acting as a counselor, and a person acting as a patient, and you see the conversation. Although the conversation was quite realistic, but still, as per our doctor collaborator, they said that this is not that realistic, right? That we generally see